Hello, welcome to Pointing Left. This is episode 24 and it's recorded on January 30th, 2018. This is Serena Blaiz bringing you news, events, and rants from for and about Central Oklahoma. Thanks for listening and if you please would, sharing. Tonight, as I record this podcast, the country is preparing to hear beginning to hear probably by now, or alternately desperate to avoid, Trump's State of the Union address, which regardless of who gives it, State of the Unions are at best an exercise in wishful thinking, but more honestly, a tribute to tribal mythology and a pablum spoon-fed to an audience whose gray matter has been destroyed by corporate, profit-obsessed media, lazy pundits, and corrupt politicians. Less famous, but just as deceptive are State of the State speeches by governors. The one for Oklahoma will be kicking off the 2018 legislative session on February 5th. It will be Mary Fallon's last one, thank goodness. And of course, mayors want a piece of that pie in the sky. So we had outgoing OKC Mayor Mick Cornett giving the OKC State of the City address on January 18th in front of a paying crowd. Who else? The Chamber of Commerce. Because business leaders really like to have the state of things explained to them after they spend the rest of the year creating it by taking from and dumping on the rest of us, right? Thankfully, January is almost over, and the desire for annual retrospectives and nonsense about fresh beginnings will be past. There is that to be thankful for at least. But we can do our own unheralded assessments of the state we're in, right? As individuals, as a community of like-minded citizens, the state of the resistance, if you will. I'll start. As I think about Trump's speech tonight and all the words posted about it today by astute thinkers or my Facebook friends, some of whom are also astute thinkers, I realize how terrorized I am. We all are after a year of this orange dullard tyrant and his enablers. In Oklahoma City, on January 20, 6,000 people attended the Women's March, which in this town is an amazing turnout for a lefty event, except last year it was 12,000. Other cities around the country reportedly retained or increased their numbers, but here, I have to remember, we are shell-shocked by so much more than Trump. Our state is in ruins after years of irresponsible government that kowtows to the oil and gas industry's every whim, the religious rights bigotry, and Alex every crazy idea. My city, Oklahoma City, is enthralled to the chamber and big money interest who swindle the rest of us with small favors and pipe dreams. More on that later. The departing mayor of that city, who snuggled in bed with every banker and oil baron he could find, ignoring the vast majority of his constituents, wants to be governor. While a Republican legislator who spent the last decade or so destroying the state seems to be sailing into that mayorship with the help of many Democrats and so-called progressives who apparently have been charmed by a few cheap votes, cheap to someone with ambitious plans for subsequent office, thus keeping said mayorship tight in the grip of the elite who run things through their city councilors. Now, don't get me started about where some city councilors have aimed their sights for subsequent office. It's musical chairs, and the 99% are the ones left standing. So, the beat goes on in OKC. How about your city? But also, try to look for the bright side. Also on January 20th in OKC and Norman, some new ways of doing things were being discussed and considered by a small group of activists. We, since I was among them, were participating in workshops put on by the Incorruptibles, which is a team of trainers using the ideas and practices of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, which took back their California town from Chevron oil company, sweeping out the bought and paid for city councilors and replacing them with people dedicated to an unwavering commitment to real democracy. Real democracy is not what we have. Not in OKC, not in OK, not in the US. Arguably, we never have, but the resistance can repeat Richmond's transformation and extend it everywhere. If we will discard the old methods that always get us what we've got now. Politicians corrupted by the need for large donations. The key, the Incorruptibles say, is to get corporate money out of politics. And the place to start is your city. Here, in a year, 12,000 was reduced to 6,000 because it was a 12-month nonstop barrage of insanity, corruption, lies, and mass psychological abuse, making people think it was hopeless, it was too hard, or in their despair wonder if it was worth it, if their own perceptions were even real. Sure, I felt like that many times this year, but I surround myself with people who are not going to let me lie low for long. Get up, you are needed by the rest of us. That's how we have to be for each other. Even for like-minded, never met in real life friends on social media. We are in a crisis, and at least a third of our country has literally lost touch with reality. Abetted by cynical power mongers and the truly insane, they manipulate into fomenting hatred and violence. Thinking about the example of Richmond, that renews my hope. Thinking about Sophie Scholl, who resisted the Third Reich in Germany, strengthens my resolve. Thinking about the courage of the dreamers fires my soul. That's why I do this podcast, for myself and for anyone who might gain from it a little bit of hope, resolve, or passion to keep going. That's what I ask of those who, like me, are part of a large movement of resistance, of democracy advocates who will keep pushing that dream of government that actually is of, for, by the people. The people. Not those few with money or power, or with so little morality they will do anything to get what they want. They really are so few, you know. Together, we can and must replace them on the city council, in the legislature, in Congress, in the White House, and in every boardroom and control room. People have the power, not the few, the 1%. So let's get to it. The state of the resistance consists in changing our thinking and unleashing our power. We have no choice if we, the people, are to live in freedom and peace, because really that's what's at stake. Now, I didn't intend to preach, but really, I know I need it, and so do others. We need to express our frustration, which no one seems to have an issue with. People are frustrated and letting it out. But we have to also express our passion for our values, which doesn't happen enough, it seems to me. So, okay, now, on to the regularly scheduled podcast. Here's what I have for you. A couple of good news items to start with from the Oklahoma Food Co-op and news item from Native activists. Then some stories that will display the destruction wrought by our current economic situation and racist, inhumane institutions all around us. A great rant by a local OKC activist called An Alternative State of the City Message. That's following the theme of this episode, after all. And then I'll finish up with some upcoming events that will hopefully give you a chance to use and expand your power, because that's what it's all about. So how about we hear some news? So first I want to tell you about the annual meeting of the Oklahoma Food Cooperative. If you've never heard of them, they are a marketing network of farmers, ranchers, artisans, and customers and volunteers that work together to bring local food and products right to you here in Oklahoma. So they've been around for a long time, but they recently got a new home. Their first, I guess the first building they've actually owned that they are part of, and they had their annual meeting there in that location. It's in that the Farmers Market District. It's at 311 South Klein was the exact address there. So Sunday the 28th they had their annual meeting. That's where they get together. You get to meet the producers, the farmers, and the others that are providing the products that come into the Oklahoma Food Co-op. You get samples, anything, and they of course elect at their annual meeting. They elect their board. So this year, part of the agenda included, of course, the general manager reports from the officers, a discussion on the cottage industry law, and of course the elections. So the result of the elections are new president Bob Waldrop, and of course he's a well-known activist and a previous president and one of the actual founders of the Oklahoma Food Co-op. Great advocate for local food. And we'll have actually a little bit more from Bob later. So also elected was Vice President for Customers Angela Nichols, Secretary Andrea Parks, and some at-large board members, Doug Latham, Janetta Tesh, Chris Gosney, and Pate and Paul Mays, and they join previously existing sitting board members who are Dustin Green, Courtney Oliveres. I'm hoping I'm totally massacring that name. Adam Price, David Lechner, and Eric Dabrowski. So congrats to the Oklahoma Food Co-op for their beautiful new building. I know that really makes a difference in their operations, and I know they'll enjoy it, and everybody else will. So another piece of good news, and we've talked about indigenous people before. Lawton, Oklahoma, the town down in the southern Oklahoma, their city council there, congratulations to them and to everyone who acted for this outcome, but they decided to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And of course, other cities in Oklahoma have done that in recent years, including I think last year Norman did, and Tulsa did. I think Tulsa, they're calling it Native American Day, but all of those are they're celebrating it on the traditional day of Columbus Day, which is the second Monday. So that's good news. Of course, in Oklahoma City, we're still stuck in the past. And in both 2015 and 2016, the Oklahoma City Council rejected to adopt Indigenous Peoples Day. And they skipped, the Native activists skipped asking in 2017. And what they did instead was have a celebration on the steps of City Hall, which was quite wonderful. I went down there and there were speakers from many of the different tribes and communities and organizations. It was it was really an amazing event. So I hope they continue that regardless of whether they get the official recognition in Oklahoma City or not. I think that event was well worth attending. It'll be the second Monday of October 2018. So mark your calendars and save the date. But I'm really proud of these other communities. I'm really frustrated with Oklahoma City for being so behind the times and so afraid to offend people that, I mean, one of the news items today or yesterday, I can't remember now, but I'm not a big sports person, but I think it was the Kansas City team has been using a very racist caricature of a Native American as their mascot image or whatever. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, you just look at it and it's just horrid. But they've decided they're going to drop that. They're going to like wait a year to drop it. But anyway, they're dropping it. So this is just, it's just, you know, it's where people's awareness is, and it's people that in leadership that just can't move their brains. It's just annoying. But that's why we have to get different people elected. These people that can't change, that can't, you know, that are just so stuck in the past. We have to get rid of them. I mean, you look at, I looked at a picture. There's some folks that are running for the Norman City Council, and I was looking at some posts on Facebook, and even the current City Council of Norman is, I mean, it's so young, and you know, it's got just 3 or 4 women, and I mean, you look at the Oklahoma City Council, and I mean, there's one woman, and there's one black man, but they're almost all just old gray-haired men. I mean, it's just, and almost all of them, their thinking is old. I just, other than Ed Shadid, really, it's not good. So, you know, those, each ward, they rotate the elections of the wards in City Council, but I think every 2 years, 3 or 4 of the wards are up. So, my goodness, think about running for office or finding somebody in your community, in your ward, that can run for office, that's open-minded and free-thinking and, you know, really cares about people and not just worried about money, worried about, you know, stroking the back of the wealthy elite in Oklahoma City. That's what we need. That's what has to change. Okay, speaking of the wealthy elite in Oklahoma City, here's some news. In today's Oklahoman, Chesapeake Energy lays off 400 employees. Now, you know, we got that big, massive tax break in Washington that was supposed to, like, save all the jobs, right? Well, it's not. It's not. That's you know, 99.9% of that money is going to the pockets of people who already have millions or billions. Chesapeake Energy, I'm not happy about people losing their jobs, but Chesapeake Energy is, you know, just one of those groups that's trying to run the city and run it not for the people, but for the few for the 1%. So 400 employees were laid off Tuesday morning. Tuesday's cuts affect about 13% of the company, include about 330 employees in Oklahoma City. Here's a quote from the CEO, Doug Lawler. The decision to reduce headcount, they're not even people. The decision to reduce headcount did not come easily for the leadership team. Dedicated, value-driven, hardworking people have been affected. You have my personal assurance that we are treating these employees fairly, respectfully, and with considerable effort to assist them with their personal and career transition. Well, you know, there's a PR written statement if ever there was one. The job cuts come after 3 years of changes at Chesapeake and throughout the industry as low commodity prices led companies to focus on fewer core assets. Chesapeake has sold about 25% of its well during that time. Lawler, quote again, while these divestitures resulted in headcount reductions in the field, again with the headcount, transition services agreements with buyers of certain assets caused us not to make corresponding staffing changes in Oklahoma. Could we get this man an editor, please? So he can talk like a human being. All those transition arrangements have now come to an end. Like, I can't even read this with a straight face. And we continue to see increased efficiencies across the country. Does he really talk like that? Oh my God. We needed to respond accordingly. Oh my God, I can't even look at that anymore. Okay, let's take a break and listen to some David Rovics.
When you're working worse. When the human right to housing isn't even part of the debate, you know you're living in a failed state. When millions of citizens are spending half their lives locked up in a prison for trying to survive. When laws must be broken just to have a place to stay. When the prisons pay the senators to look the other way. If you have to be a criminal to put food upon your plate, you know you're living in a failed state. When you're facing climate breakdown, when the trees are all on fire, when half the country's underwater, when a climate change denier runs the country, the opposition party votes for oil rigs and pipelines. This is not so much a country as it is a corporation buckling under its weight. You know you're living in a failed state. When your nation is an empire facing daily blowback, and the only thing your leaders can think to do is attack. Bipartisan consensus that we need to spend $700 billion before the year's end on a military budget to make America great. You know you're living in a failed state. When almost every day some psycho with a gun has to open fire on a crowd before it's done. When a music festival becomes a free fire zone and all they can say is it's okay now, he was acting alone. Buy some armor, pray to God, and hide behind the gate. You know you're living in a failed state. You know you're living in a failed state. You know you're living in a failed state.
Oh, that was David Rovix with Failed State. Here's a story. This is from the OK Policy Institute website. Oklahoma's debtors' prisons aren't just a nuisance, they're an epidemic. This was filed on January 30th, 2018 by Ryan Gensler. And I'll just read bits, the beginning and a couple of excerpts to get you the gist of it. Here we go. The problem of debtors' prisons in Oklahoma has slowly come out into the open in recent years. More and more criminal defendants have been unable to pay off the thousands of dollars in fines and fees piled on them by our justice system. When they fail to pay, a warrant is issued for their arrest, and they may spend several days in jail for the crime of being too poor. Heartbreaking stories of Oklahomans incarcerated for failure to pay their court costs have appeared everywhere, from Oklahoma Watch to the New York Times. But we haven't had a great understanding of just how many defendants are affected. A new OK Policy analysis of court records in 5 counties shows that the number of people who are affected is staggering. In one county, as many as 2 in 3 criminal cases result in an arrest warrant for failure to pay at some point. It's yet more evidence that the excessive fines and fees imposed on criminal defendants are creating enormous hardship for the people who can least afford it. So it goes on to say that a little bit later, court records show that failure to pay warrants were issued in about 2 in 3 felony cases that resulted in court costs filed in Tulsa County in 2008. That means a solid majority of those who had cases that were disposed as a conviction, deferral, or dismissal with costs could not pay their court fines and fees. In Rogers County, over half of 2008 felony defendants had a warrant issued for failure to pay. The numbers aren't much better for misdemeanors, even though court fines and fees tend to be lower and fewer. and fewer defendants qualify for a public defender. In 3 of the 5 counties from which we collected data, failure to pay warrants were issued in about half of misdemeanor cases filed in 2008. So the article goes on to explain that failure to pay warrants hinder defendants' rehabilitation and are a waste of resources, and that courts often ignore the requirement to make a good faith effort to assess each defendant's ability to pay. And it concludes with this: strong legislation to standardize ability to pay calculations, reduce the impact of debtors' prisons, and create repayment pilot programs was considered last year, but ultimately failed. Similar bills will almost certainly be introduced this year. For the sake of the lives of thousands of Oklahomans who became entrapped by this needless cycle of debt and incarceration, lawmakers must pass these reforms in 2018. I concur. Speaking of the OK Policy Institute, they're a great source for news, for analysis, for opinion. They're really just what is it? What's that term? Thought leader? I'll go back and check with Lawler and see if that's the right term. So I'm on their email list. So I got this email that I thought was interesting, relating to this Step Up. I started to call it 12-step program. It's called the Step Up Oklahoma plan. We need a 12-step program for the legislature and the budget. So this is I'll try to read it with a straight voice. So this is about the Step Up Oklahoma plan, which is a comprehensive proposal aimed at stabilizing Oklahoma's budget and reforming state government. So they took a look at that. It's put together by mostly business leaders. So right away you're going like antennas up. So he says, this is from David Blatt, the head guy over there. In our blog post examining the Step Up Oklahoma plan, OK Policy recognizes that it is a serious attempt to address budget problems that have plagued our state for years. The Step Up Coalition has recognized that Oklahoma's structural budget deficit can only be fixed through approval of new permanent revenues. Overall, the coalition has proposed a balanced mix of new revenues, which include a $1.50 per pack cigarette tax increase, a 6 cents per gallon motor fuel tax increase, an increase in the initial gross production tax rate from 2 to 4%, and changes to the personal income tax. Together, all the revenue proposals are expected to generate $750 million a year, enough to provide a $5,000 a year raise for all teachers and principals, fill the current budget hole, and generate an additional $367 million to stabilize the budget and fund essential services. However, OK Policy has serious concerns with the plan's income tax proposals, which include ending or limiting a number of deductions while adding 2 new tax brackets and creating a new credit for low-income households. This approach is unnecessarily convoluted and confusing and would leave over half of all taxpayers earning more than $32,000 per year paying higher income tax. We also have serious doubts that the proposal would generate anywhere near the amount suggested by the Tax Commission. Oklahoma has alternative approaches to income tax reform that would be simpler, more progressive, and provide more certain revenue gains. These would include some mix of restoring the top 5.25% rate, assessing a higher income surcharge, ending the capital gains tax break, restoring the full earned income tax credit, and raising the standard deduction. We are hopeful that lawmakers will strengthen the Step Up Oklahoma plan by adopting a better approach to the income tax. In addition, while the proposed governance reforms include some promising ideas, especially the recommendation to lower State Question 640's revenue threshold, the entire package needs greater scrutiny. Thank you very much, Mr. Blatt. I agree with all his assessments in terms of the progressive, the needs for really... we need to stop socking it to the people that can least afford to pay it and do the opposite. Simple. Now, staying on the Step Up Oklahoma, plan for a minute, got this response by the House Democratic Caucus to the proposal. We are appreciative of the members of the business community who recognize that the failed Republican fiscal policy is the cause of Oklahoma's current budget crisis. However, we believe the plan presented today is lacking in important details, and our caucus is hesitant to endorse the proposal at this time, especially given the stark lack of diversity among the members of the coalition. We will be discussing the plan with members of our communities and districts, and also with stakeholders who were left out of the coalition, such as the wind industry, state employees, teachers, correctional officers, and working families who have been adversely impacted by devastating budget cuts. House Democrats released a budget plan almost a year ago, the Restoring Oklahoma Plan. We are encouraged that Step Up Oklahoma's proposal incorporated portions of that plan, such as the gross production tax and the personal income tax. But again, those portions of the proposal are severely lacking in details. The House Democrats and Step Up Oklahoma seem unified in the belief that if we don't invest in Oklahoma teachers, public employees, health care, education, roads, and corrections, our entire state economy is left in peril. The House Democratic Caucus is ready to work with Step Up Oklahoma to build on this common ground and form a budget solution that works for all Oklahomans. Unquote. So most of that I agree with. Now, I expect that, as usual in Oklahoma, the business leaders will, their influence will weigh heavily and really dominate the discussion. But it's really important for all of us citizens to talk to our legislators and explain to them that you want a more fair system where the cost is distributed to fund services are distributed to those who can most afford it and not those who can least afford it. I think that sums it up fairly fairly succinctly. So now, as promised, we're back to our theme of state of the city, state of the something. This is a great rant. It's a little long, but I'm going to go for it. I think it's worth it. I think you'll appreciate it. It's from Bob Waldrop. He is, in addition, we talked about him being the founder and now the new president again of the Oklahoma Food Co-op. He is also the founder of the Oscar Romero Catholic Worker House. So he's a longtime activist. I don't agree with Bob about everything, but I'm personally, I'm not religious, but I really respect. He's one of the people whose faith really follows what I think the Christianity is supposed to be about. He believes in helping the poor, and he doesn't just talk about it; he does it. Things like the food co-op, the food bank, he every weekend he's taking food packages out to people. The Oscar Romero Catholic Worker House is a place where people can find refuge. I just really admire him a lot. And he has a blog. It's at bobwaldrop.net, and it's bobwaldrop.net. It's the title of his blog is Bobaganda. And he posted this on January 24th, an alternative state of the city message. And as mentioned earlier in January, Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett had given the state of the city address to the chamber, and I think what he said was probably predictable. But here's what Bob has to say. Earlier this month, Mayor Mick Cornett delivered his annual State of the City speech, giving his view from the top down as to how Oklahoma City is doing. This alternative presentation is a view from the bottom up. Oklahoma City is a place located on lands looted from the Creek, Muskogee, and Seminole peoples who were forcibly relocated here by the United States government in the 1820s. There may be nothing to be done about that at this late date, but forgetting our origins is a moral peril. Oklahoma City is a place where we make twice as much in fines and court fees as it costs us to operate our court system. Cash bail ensures poor people are held until trial. They are charged rent for being in jail, even if they are later found innocent or charges are dropped. This can be more than $1,200 a month. If they do not pay, they are hunted down, arrested, and incarcerated in our debtor's prison, the county jail. Our municipal courts do not always advise people coming before them of their rights to a hearing to determine their ability to pay fines and costs. This social Darwinist approach of city government grows out of the attitudes of our dominant culture and its leadership class. We are deaf to the plea of the single mother of 3 children for mercy for a ticket and cost amounting to hundreds of dollars for some random, nonviolent crime that hardly deserves that classification. Oklahoma City is a place where, under the guise of redevelopment, the city and state have used eminent domain to ruthlessly destroy entire neighborhoods, mostly peopled by persons and communities of color, scattering neighbors who have lived together for generations and paying them cheap prices for their properties. Eminent domain is essential to the processes of structural racism that keep poor people poor. The destruction of the Deep Deuce and the development of the hospital innovation districts are textbook examples of structural racism at work. It's very clever how it happens. As Oklahoma City schools integrated, white people moved to Edmond. A freeway connecting downtown OKC with Edmond was necessary to accommodate the white flighters. It jammed its way right through the Deep Deuce. But it's not accidental that so many African Americans lived in its path, because it was the only part of town they were allowed to live in by law for decades. Obviously, it was their fault that they were black. If they weren't black, they wouldn't have had to live in that neighborhood. Plausible deniability is all over the place then and now. We give an occasional quick wink and a nod to the sacrifices of people of color to benefit those in the dominant culture who disliked them so much they were moving to Edmond to keep their kids out of schools with them. And I will just add a note that probably the wealthier ones moved to Edmond, the poorer ones moved to El Reno and Yukon. Maybe Mustang. Anyway, they went west rather than north. Later, the remaining Deep Deuce, back to Bob, later the remaining Deep Deuce eminently domained properties were transferred via various sweetheart deals to wealthy and politically well-connected developers, mostly white, of course. The mostly black original owners, these are people driven out by court orders via a due-processed white riot that destroyed their neighborhoods just as thoroughly as the Tulsa rioters did to the Greenwood neighborhood in 1921, get nothing from the newly politicized value of their former properties. All the construction and economic activities in the Deep Deuce and the Innovation Hospital districts grows from these foundations of land theft by government decree. In this process, more low-income housing was destroyed that was subsequently built, so this eminently domained system of structural racism also raised rents for everyone. How convenient for the landlords and how inconvenient for the renters. I'm sure it's an accident that most landlords are white. It's hard to build family wealth, however, so you can become a landlord when you are forced to sell your most valuable asset, your home, for a low non-market price, and then you have to buy new property at actual market prices. Oklahoma City has forced this upon some families as many as 3 times since the 1970s. This destroyed enormous amounts of family wealth and community cohesion for the sake of assorted pie-in-the-sky white people economic redevelopment gimcrackery. This is not the mythical invisible hand of the marketplace at work. It is the foreseeable result of public policies enacted by the government of Oklahoma City, which has always been controlled by white people. If this wasn't enough, and it obviously isn't, after all this history is studiously ignored by the dominant culture, its media, and its leadership class, and with the most enormous amount of hypocrisy possible, we say that their poverty is all their own fault and nobody else had anything to do with it. Oklahoma City is a place where we spend $1 billion spiffing up downtown, fattening the wallets of well-connected developers and construction companies with huge welfare checks from the taxpayers. But our advice to the poor is always, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When 3 of the richest guys in the state showed up on the porch at City Hall with their plan to snatch the Seattle Sonics and make them the OKC Thunder, Mayor Cornett didn't say, "Great idea. I'll support you all the way as you bootstrap yourselves into this new endeavor." No, he did not say that. He most emphatically did not say that. He said, "Here's the city checkbook, boys. How much do you want?" Oklahoma City is a place run for the profit of rent-seeking economic aristocrats who loot the common good with their crony capitalistic schemes. Oklahoma City is a place where the permitting process for a tabletop shop, which is a small table or stand on a sidewalk, is so Byzantine that we might as well say it's illegal. Los Angeles has 50,000 tabletop shops, which means 50,000 people are able to create a micro-enterprise living for themselves with low barriers to market entry. OKC will hand out any amount of money to politically well-connected developers, but the city can't provide an easy process to prevent tabletop shops on sidewalks and other public rights of way. Oklahoma City is a place where there is no plan to finance and operate a robust bus system that gets people to work, shop, worship, and learn, potentially benefiting hundreds of thousands of people in central Oklahoma. Most of our jobs are not reasonably accessible via the bus. We have no specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, smart, goals for the bus system. Instead, the city is spending 4 times the annual cost of our bus system to build a downtown streetcar to nowhere, and then we take $3.5 million from the general fund for its operations. If there was $3.5 million in surplus revenue this year, why no improvements in the bus system? The dominant culture's leadership class makes regular claims that there will be such a robust system. We should all just be patient. In the absence of those smart goals for the bus system and a transparent public plan with actual details, we can only conclude that there is no plan. Since there is no plan, the claim by political and transportation leaders that the bus system is a priority and will eventually become robust are neither believable nor credible. Oklahoma City is a place where we persecute the poorest of the poor with egregious violations of their First Amendment right to beg for help in public. It's not enough that we set up situations of cascading sorrows that render people homeless. No, we must lock them up and levy fines and costs on them for begging the public for help. And then we callously and hypocritically claim that this is for their own benefit. Oklahoma City is a place with a glittery downtown and a wannabe sophisticated urban culture that functions as a Potemkin village hiding the ugly realities of a city where 88% of the Oklahoma City public school students are eligible for free or reduced price lunches. Our willingness to let all of this evolve without insistently asking questions of morality and prudence speaks poorly of the character of the people of Oklahoma City and the political, economic, cultural, and religious organizations of its dominant culture. We have not held people accountable. We have turned our eyes away and ignored corruption. We have let the crony capitalists run amok at great cost to the common good. We are not taking decisive action now to secure justice, opportunity, and equity for all in this city. So it comes to pass that Oklahoma City is a place where solidarity is an increasingly alien, foreign concept, apparently not a major concern to the dominant culture and its leadership class, until the next tornado anyway. Then the pressure of circumstances forces us to do what we should do anyway, but right now we think we can get by without it. If it were important, things would be different, but they aren't, so there you go. If we want Oklahoma City to become a better place, then each of us must endeavor to be better people. This is especially important for the dominant culture and its leadership class because that is where the majority of our problems arise. All of this public social evil with such consequences for so many people grows out of individual bad decisions of omission and commission. Some, of course, are more responsible and culpable than others. Of those, the Lord Jesus Christ in the 25th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew says, "And these will go off to eternal punishment." unquote. However pious the thought, it remains a cold comfort in the present situation. Again, that was Bob Waldrop with his alternative state of the city message. I think that is a fine, fine rant. That's why I wanted to share it with you. So thanks for sticking with us. I'm sorry this has gotten kind of long, but I thought I really wanted to share Bob Waldrop's piece with you. And then, of course, I ended up inserting a rant of my own at the beginning, so things got a lot longer than I planned for, but I hope you've enjoyed it. And seeing as how I haven't done a podcast for a month, I'm making up for lost time, but I'm just going to finish it up here with a few quick announcements of some upcoming events that hopefully can help make our state and city better, because that's what it's going to take, us, you and me, doing it, the people. All right, first, Women and Children First Advocacy Training. This is the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. Sorry about that. I've lost my place here. Yeah. All right. So it's the it's basically getting you ready to help advocate for women and children in the 2018 legislative session. And it's the OICA, Women Lead Oklahoma, Oklahoma Women's Coalition, and Together Oklahoma. They've all come together to put this on. It's February 5th, and the registration fee is just $20. And it takes place at the Girl Scouts West facility, 6100 North Robinson, Oklahoma City. So if you're interested in that, go to oica.org, oica.org, and check it out. Next, also keeping the legislative session in view here, the Sierra Club is also having their advocacy, what they call the Citizen Lobby Academy. That will be on February 10th. They're going to have that from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Gopuram Taste of India, which is at 4559 Northwest 23rd Street in Oklahoma City. $15 only. That includes the cost of the workshop materials, a lunch buffet, and a drink. And if you can't make that, scholarships are available. So you do need to RSVP for that. So that's the Sierra Club. You can find them on Facebook or the internet is Sierra Club. Okay, sierraclub.org, and then drill down to your local state. Johnson Bridgewater is the head guy there, so you might end up talking to him. And certainly if you go to this event, you'll meet him and get involved with helping save our environment. All right, here's one more. Again, legislative review, this time on reproductive rights, conducted by the Oklahoma Coalition for Reproductive Justice. And that will actually be an online Facebook Live event, so you don't have to leave the comfort of your own home. Maybe it'll be cold on February 4th and you don't want to go anywhere. You can just stay there and tune in online. February 4th, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Again, that's Oklahoma Coalition for Reproductive Justice, and they are the page for that where the live event will be held is facebook.com/OCRJ Pink Wave, all one word, OCRJ Pink Wave. So that's the last of the events, specific events, but here's sort of a be on your toes, be ready event, okay? This is the Mueller-Rosenstein firing watch. So if during the State of the Union tonight, which I'm missing, thankfully, I'm recording this podcast, if he hasn't fired Mueller publicly from that podium or anything, hasn't happened yet. So if you hear about it, when it happens, if it happens, and I'm beginning to think more and more likely that it is going to happen, here's what you're going to do. Every city is going to have it. The one in Oklahoma City is going to be the capital. There's one in Norman. I think there may be one in Edmond or Stillwater. But at any rate, if you're in Oklahoma City where I am, you're going to go to the capital. So if he is fired before 2 p.m., the rally will start at 5 p.m. that day. If it happens after 2 p.m., then the rally will happen at noon the next day. All right, so it will be at the Capitol. And here's a good way to stay in touch in terms of knowing what's happening. You can text Mueller, Mueller, that's the guy that's heading up the special investigation, Mueller. Text that to the ResistBot number, which is 50409. Again, text Mueller, Mueller, to the ResistBot 50409. And you can also use that ResistBot to get regular reminders to contact your legislators, your congresspeople, to act on legislation. So if you need those little reminders, if that's helpful to you, they'll give you the phone numbers and everything. It's really helpful. But if you hear this, please come out and join that demo to demand that we have accountability in our government, and that this kind of corruption cannot stand, and the collusion will not stand. Trying to stop the investigation will not stand. I posted this on Facebook as a pack a bag, set it by the door. Stay tuned to news sources and be ready to hit the streets. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening to this long tirade-filled podcast today. But hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know. If you didn't, let me know. If you want it to go a different way, let me know. I really, I kind of was going to give it up, and then somebody gave me some positive feedback, and I thought, oh, okay, I guess people do like it. So it's really hard talking into a void when nobody's there, So if you listen, just let me know. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Thanks again for listening. This is Serena Blaiz with Pointing Left, and I'm going to leave you, let Michael Moore take us out with a few words from his speech last night at the People's State of the Union.
Much damage has been done, most of it out of sight, and much of it seemingly permanent. The need to remove him, and also any Democrat who is in the way of removing him. That is, at this point, a moral imperative for each and every one of us. But removing him and Pence and the whole disgusting lot of them in Congress and in our state capitals still won't be enough. We must remove and replace the system and the culture that gave us Trump in the first place.